Mansfield today on a Monday. Happy Women's Day to all of our female viewers. A hectic weekend, which saw the Lions crying, Morné Steyn doing the damage there. It was also very nice to see real racing in the form of Motor Grand Prix. The Binder brothers doing very well in Austria. Nice to see MotoGP once again, as opposed to watching the Formula One Scalextrics just going round and round and round. Also, a big announcement on Thursday evening, which has led to a load of speculation over the weekend. The top story, Chris Gibbons, has got to be the appointment of ANC economic heavyweight Enoch Godongwana as Minister of Finance. He's replacing the reluctant Tito Mboweni, who's now able to go and retire on his farm in Kloof, replete with garlic and pilchards.
Yes, good morning, Jeremy. Absolutely. It's been clear, I think, for some time that the ex-Reserve Bank governor and former Minister of Labour had been wanting out for some time. In fact, he was a very reluctant candidate in the first place, and President Ramaphosa had to lean on him quite heavily to get him to accept the job in the first place. We've been hearing whispers as well that his hard line on government spending was not going down well with either the SA Communist Party or COSATU, key allies in the tripartite alliance. On his way to Kloof.
Yeah, well, I mean, Enoch Godongwana, he's been around for a while. I mean, he's a former deputy minister. He was ANC economic policy head and currently also chair of the Development Bank of Southern Africa. What's the general reaction been to his appointment, Chris?
Well, Jeremy, the RAND dropped 2.5% immediately his name was announced. It came back that night, the same night. It was down 1% on Friday morning. Almost no movement at all in the government's 10-year bond, which is a very good sign. But I tell you what, let's bring in an expert now, one of South Africa's foremost economists, a business leader in his own right, Professor Adrian Saville, Director of the Centre for African Management and Markets at Pretoria University's Gordon Institute for Business Science. Adrian, good morning to you and welcome. Enoch Godongwana, what was your reaction when you heard his name?
Chris, there'd been a lot of news and noise for some time that there was pressure for a much broader cabinet reshuffle. This, I think it needs to be read in that context, putting on a political hat. What worries me, leaving aside the appointment of Enoch Godongwana, what worries me is the changing horses midstream in a very, very difficult financial circumstance. I think whoever you put in it, this has to be read against that backdrop. The however is the new minister, Godongwana, he's well known to the market. He's generally well liked by the market, and the market has regard for him.
Adrian, what do we know about Godongwana's views on economic policy?
You know, Jeremy, there's comment on a recent article in a leading business publication, and the reference to the Business Day article is being taken as sort of the go-to point on his stance. He is very pragmatic, and the suggestion is that he's going to be a valuable go-between between the hardliners and the structural reformers or the structural adjusters. That he has the necessary pull and traction on both sides of that spectrum. So, what we know about him from a policy perspective is relatively little. He has played an important role in contributing to policy and policy direction and the broad country narrative, but we've never seen him in the role of minister.
Adrian, do you think that he is likely to be as tight-fisted as his predecessor, as Tito was? And if your answer to that is no, doesn't that spell problems for the government, the size of government debt?
No, Chris, now we're deep into the world of speculation, and I have to start every sentence here with based on what we know, or the facts at hand. it does seem to be the case that he's likely to be more lenient, less strident and stringent on the fiscal purse string. We can quickly ask whether that's a good or a bad thing. Would it be better to have a more free spending public sector? And on this score, the one area in which we have been far too prudent is infrastructure spend. And so it won't be lost on you from the introduction that Jeremy gave that the minister has a background in infrastructure spend. I don't think that should be lost in this conversation. If this is going to be freeing the purse strings to keep the pressure off the public wage bill, the public sector wage bill, well, the ratings agencies have been very, very vocal on that.
Well, the markets as well seem to have taken his appointment and Tito Mboweni's exit in their stride, Adrian.
You were talking about the weekend, Jeremy. Remember the weekend when we had a Minister of Finance for just the weekend?
Well, it's day number 5 today.
5-day game. So let's again put it sort of on the spectrum of things that could have been, and appointments that were possible. This is a very level-headed, go-to, I think, pragmatic appointment. There's also a commentary behind this that Minister Godongwana is allied to or supportive of the Ramaphosa campaign on the structural adjustment front. All of that needs to be put into context. Chris, when you spoke about the rand moving by 2%, in the context of an emerging market currency, that sort of sharp reaction could be people closing out positions, anticipating some type of market meltdown. It might have been a knee-jerk reaction, but when we put together the market reading and alongside the currency market, I think we should put the bond market. That's where you get the biggest voice on the likely trajectory of government finances. Both the bond market and the currency market have taken this in their stride.
So, Adrian, let's sum up then. What would you say are Godongwana's biggest challenges?
Without question, the first is getting his arms around the public sector wage bill. Without question, because the current economic hole will get into a better place as investment spending recovers. We've got a very fortunate tailwind of a commodity price boom that's provided a windfall, unanticipated revenue for the fiscus. But it remains the fact that we have a very large public sector wage bill that, measured by emerging market standards, measured by almost any standards, it is simply unsustainable. That wage bill has to be squared up to. And it's not necessarily about taking wages lower. It's about getting bang for our public sector buck. It's about making sure that this public sector delivers. And a public sector with this type of wage bill should have vaccine rollout done and dusted in 6 months. We should be shouting from the rooftops about our education sector delivery and so on. So I think that's the one thing. If I could add 2 more to fill my wish list. The second is the state-owned enterprises remain a perennial headwind to economic growth and recovery. We have to get these state-owned enterprises right-sized, properly structured, fully functioning. There has been progress on that front, but that aspect requires money, it requires time, it requires governance, and it requires a coherent strategy. I think that's a critical component of my third element in the wish list, which is making sure that the much spoken about structural reforms happen. Those structural reforms include right-sizing the SOEs, writing the SOEs, sorting out the public sector wage bill, but there is much more. And in that much more is included infrastructure spend, retiring or getting public sector debt back down to manageable levels, achieving the 2-decade-long spoken about inclusive economic growth, redressing inequality. And then there's some low-hanging fruit, such as the release of spectrum. Now, why that hasn't been released, that doesn't sit inside the Minister of Finance's mandate, but all of this points to that cocktail.
There we'll leave it. We've been talking to Professor Adrian Saville, Director of the Centre for African Management and Markets, Pretoria University's Gordon Institute for Business Science. Adrian, thanks for joining us this morning. Jeremy.
Being with you.
Thank you, Adrian. Just having a look at the Chinese tech stocks. Chris, pressure still very much on them. Tencent in particular, and that continues to hammer both Naspers and Prosus, doesn't it?
Jeremy, very much so. Last Tuesday saw Tencent drop 10% in a single day. And this followed a report in a government-aligned newspaper which called online gaming spiritual opium. Tencent immediately put new restrictions in place to limit access by youngsters, but that was not enough, I'm afraid, to stop the rot. Tencent's market cap went close to $1 trillion earlier this year. It's now down to just 550 billion. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Millions and billions. Now, just under 30% of Tencent, of course, China's largest internet and online gaming company owned by Naspers and its subsidiary Prosus. At one stage, Naspers accounted for 25% of the entire capital of the JSE. That has now dropped to just 15%. Still an enormous number, but a very, very significant drop. Tencent's founder, Pony Ma, has seen his personal fortune drop by nearly $14 billion. He's still worth around $46 billion, so no need to weep too hard for him, I don't think.
This whole crackdown on the Chinese tech shares has been going since, November last year. What's it all about? What's driving it, Chris?
Jeremy, you're right. Since Alibaba's Jack Ma was forced to pull the plug on the listing of Ant Financial, which at the time we thought was just one outspoken billionaire getting his knuckles rapped. But no, since then we've seen a number of big tech companies targeted, as well as the absolute blitzing of the private education system in China. That's been hammered far harder than big tech. So at one level, it's simple. This is the Chinese Communist Party reminding everyone of who is the boss. But if you look a little bit closer and read the tech and the education crackdowns together, we can see a much more nuanced picture. There's an excellent piece on this in the Financial Times at the moment, and it reminds us that the entrance exam to China's universities, the Gaokao, is at the center of all of this. The Gaokao is massively competitive. The better you do, the better the university you get into, and the better or worse the rest of your life. It's as stark as that. So parents have been shelling out more and more for private tutors to make sure that little Hua or Chen get the best chance in life. Intense pressure on parents to find the extra cash, intense pressure on the kids themselves, evidence that people in the cities find it easier to shell out the extra cash than people in the rural areas. That is not enhancing social stability, and it's demonstrating enhanced inequality. There's also the fear that the kids themselves, some at least, are saying, to hell with all of this, and they're retreating into the world of online gaming. And that phrase we referred to earlier, calling online gaming spiritual opium, is a very telling one. It's a very clear reference to what the Chinese Communist Party calls the 100 years of humiliation, which began in 1839 with the first Opium War and ended in 1949 when the Chinese Communist Party came to power. So this is President Xi Jinping emphasizing ideological purity and control and trying to ensure long-term social stability.
Anglo Gold has taken a big knock over its mine in Ghana. What's the story there?
This is the Obuasi mine, which was supposed to have been back online after an accident, as they called it, stopped production in May. But now, according to Anglo Gold's interim CEO, Christine Ramon, looks as though Obuasi might be out of action for the rest of this year. As a result, Anglo Gold's had to cut its production guidance by some 12%, That saw its share comp came off by 12%. AngloGold has over $545 million US invested in Obuasi. You can't afford to have that kind of cash sitting in an unproductive hole in the ground for too long.
So what exactly are the problems at Obuasi?
That is a very good question. They have been hanging around AngloGold's neck for a number of years, pretty much in fact since the 2004 merger with Ghana's Ashanti. The problems relate to some very tough labour laws in Ghana, much tougher than our own, incidentally. There are also problems, grievances, flowing from the local community and encroachment on AngloGold's concession by illegal migrant miners. Throw into the mix, this poisonous mix, water, air and soil pollution, season liberally with occasional deadly violence, and you can see why AngloGold is going to have difficulties at Obuasi for some time to come.
Finally, Sandparks looks like it's going in the process, at least, of going cashless.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more and more companies and operations follow the route that Sandparks is heading down. From September 1 this year, 12 of our national parks will go cashless. And the aim is that by the end of 2023, all of the rest would have followed suit. Why? Well, there are two reasons. First, it's easier. If you're queuing to get into a park in peak season, it will save time. But second, it's about staff safety. No cash means no target for thieves.
But can they do this? You know, I thought the rand was legal tender, and it has to be accepted as a form of payment if you want to pay in rands, unless you're trying to do something silly like pay 100 rand in 1 cent coins, even though we don't have a 1 cent coin anymore.
Business Insider, which broke the original story, asked the Reserve Bank that very question, and the bank, of course, sets the rules in these things, and back came the answer: yes, Sandparks is entitled to decide what it will accept as means of payment based on its risk and business model. This is normal principle in commerce, unquote. So cashless is fine, but there's always a but, isn't there? Jeremy, you and I both go to Kruger Park as often as we can, and we both know that many of the camps, especially in the center of the park, Satara, for example, the internet can be unusable. MTN is a particular problem, Vodacom not so much, but I've certainly had instances where I've been in a park shop buying provisions and my card has simply not worked because the internet is down, the machine is not talking to the cloud or whatever the machine talks to, and that's why I always carry some cash with me in Kruger. So either the internet there is going to have to improve, or this whole scheme is going to look very wobbly indeed.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your insight once again, and you've been threatening to bring a whole lot of business books onto the show, so maybe next week we could take a look at some of those, the ones that you've been reading and found interesting, and share your insight there on that. Nice to speak to you again. Chris Gibbons, our business journalist who joins us every Monday, courtesy of it's at Capital Legacy, your #1 provider of wills and estate administration. As you may have seen on the ticker tape, two very big CSI initiatives being announced by the Mansfield Today team coming up this weekend, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. So make sure you join us for those, and you can find out more about what we're going to be doing in the community, along with our partners, people like Capital Legacy. Until next time, look after yourself and goodbye.